Hey, what's going on? I'm Matt O'Leary back with another video, and today I'll be talking about Joe Douglas's press conference from yesterday and some of my takeaways from it and what we learned from it. Before we get started today, I just wanted to mention you can follow me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. If you haven't already, please make sure to check out the podcast, and link to the merch store is down below in the description. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about in the Douglas press conference was Sam Darnold. Obviously, a topic of conversation, the Jets' biggest storyline from this offseason. What the heck are they going to do when it comes to Sam Darnold? And he said that the Jets would answer the call. Now, to me, that hints that they are closer to their decision. And if they're answering the call, I would tend to believe that they are looking to move on. And the reason for that, if you believe Sam Darnold is the guy, then you are not answering the phone call. You don't believe that it is you don't do that with your franchise quarterback. So to me, this shows that the Jets are leaning towards moving on from Sam Darnold. Maybe they just want to see what they can get for Sam Darnold, but it's not a good sign that if you're a Sam Darnold supporter and are in the keep Sam Darnold camp, it's not a good sign that the general manager is saying, oh, we'll answer phone calls. To me, if he is really your guy, then you're coming out and saying, Sam's our guy and we're not, going to move him and stuff like that. He did say that he believes that he could reach his ceiling, which you can look at that however you want it. I look at it as trying to maximize value. But as far as it goes with Sam in the future with the Jets, I don't think it's going to be a long-term benefit on both sides. I think the Jets are going to look to move Sam Darnold, and I think that's what Joe Douglas hinted at with that take, which is we're going to be answering phone calls. So that already shows that they're 1 foot out the door on Sam Darnold in my eyes. So to me, that was the biggest one. The next thing is him talking about building through the draft, which isn't necessarily a surprise. And it's something that they're going to have to do because they have a ton of picks over the next few years. So let's just talk about, if they do move Sam Darnold, that's another draft pick on top of it, and one that they already have 2 first-rounders in. They have a high second-round pick. They have 2 in the 3rd round. They have 2 in the 5th round. They have a ton of draft assets this year to get creative and try to maximize that and build your team through the draft. And they have a bunch of needs: quarterback, edge, wide receiver, running back. What did I say? Edge already? Yeah. Potentially linebacker if you want some depth behind C.J. Mosley. So there is going to be opportunities for Joe Douglas to build this team through the draft, and that seems like his MO from day one. When he came in here, he seemed like he wanted to build this thing up and build the trenches up through the draft, which is what the teams that he was with did in Baltimore and the Eagles before the Eagles went off on the deep end. But building this team through the draft, you shouldn't look at that as a surprise. So to me, reading between the tea leaves, maybe he doesn't feel comfortable moving the picks for Deshaun Watson, and he would like to either take his own guy or build the team through the draft that way instead of giving up those assets. I think Watson's a bit of a unique situation, but that's why, they do have the assets to get that done. But all along my thought was, I don't know if Joe Douglas is going to want to do that. And my concern is still there, I guess, based on what he said yesterday. Next up is free agency. And since he talked about the draft and building through the draft, it makes me think that they're not going to go nuts in free agency. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to sign anybody and it's going to be like last offseason. I think they will look to add pieces, but I don't think they're going to come away with Tooney, Robinson, a big-time corner, a big-time edge. They might look to supplement their team through free agency, which is probably a smart move. You have to have a balance, and with the Jets having a ton of cap space, maybe they bring in a big free agent here. And last year it seemed like they were really heavy in on Conklin, and if Tooney hit the market, it seemed like they were going to be heavy in on him. So to me, that's the thing that would stand out to me. If the Jets are going to make a splash in free agency, I think it's going to be on the offensive line, specifically with either Tooney or Lindsley, depending on who's available and what the Jets want to do there. But I think I'd be surprised if we see a big-name offensive lineman, another big-name edge, another big-name wide receiver to long-term deals, where I don't think that's Joe Douglas' plan. I think he'll bring in a couple guys and some depth through free agency, but I don't think he's going to go, balls to the wall and spend big-time money year after year. Last thing we could touch on is Marcus May. So there is obviously the Twitter drama online, and this was the quote from Joe Douglas about Marcus May. Our stance with Marcus hasn't changed. Marcus is a valuable member of this organization. He's someone who started his career here and has been a pro's pro. He's smart, reliable, and provided outstanding leadership. Our plan hasn't changed, and we are in the process of working to have Marcus here long term. So I think they want to have him here for a while. Now, that doesn't mean that they might not still franchise him for this year. That might be their best option because then you're not tied in long term. And on top of that, you're probably saving some money because the franchise tag is what, like $10-11 million, somewhere in that range for a safety, where if he's getting a long-term deal, he probably is going to want, I don't know, $12 million a year, maybe a little bit more than that. I'd be surprised if it got over 14 million, but somewhere in that 12 to 14 range, I guess. But ultimately here, as I talked about in one of my previous videos, I think it could benefit both sides to have a franchise tag deal, because for the Jets, you're not long-term into a guy who's approaching 30 years old. And for Marcus May, it allows him to get that pay bump and then hit the market in 2022 when the cap is expected to go back up, and hopefully COVID's not as big of a thing at that point affecting the market, because this offseason, not a lot of teams have a lot of money to spend. So COVID is definitely affecting the market based on that. Next year, probably not going to have that when the cap goes back up and the market increases because of it. So to me, those were my biggest takeaways from Douglas's press conference. He didn't really say a ton, but if you try to read between the lines a little bit, I think you could kind of see the direction where this thing is going. And we'll see what happens. But for now, just let me know what you thought about the Joe Douglas press conference in the comments below. What were some of your biggest takeaways from it? Get at me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure to subscribe if you are new, and I'll talk to you next time.